It doesn't arrive as panic. It arrives as silence. Money fear changes after 40. It becomes quieter and harder to name. Earlier fears were loud and obvious. They were about earning enough, about proving capability, about getting started. After 40, the fear feels different. It appears inside stable lives, lives with income, routine, and structure. From the outside, everything looks fine. Inside, something feels unsettled. The morning starts like any other weekday. The alarm rings at a familiar hour. You sit up slowly before getting out of bed. The calendar on your phone already looks full. There is no urgency, only inevitability. Coffee is prepared without thought. The kitchen feels quiet and predictable. Morning light comes through the window. Emails are checked before breakfast finishes. The commute begins through the same streets. Traffic moves steadily without surprise. Familiar faces wait at the same crossings. An office building rises ahead as expected. You walk in knowing exactly what the day holds. Meetings, tasks, responsibilities, repetition. Paperwork waits patiently on the desk. Conversations sound practiced and efficient. Lunch happens quickly and quietly. The afternoon passes without incident. Late evening arrives on schedule. You step outside into a quiet street. The city feels slower than your thoughts. At home, the kitchen table waits. An empty room reflects the day back to you. Nothing went wrong. And yet, the fear is there. The fear does not announce itself clearly. It does not say, "You are broke." It says something subtler. What if this is as stable as it gets? What if there is no margin left? What if one change breaks the balance? You start thinking further ahead than before. Not in years, in contingencies. Health, employment, energy, time. You notice how dependent everything feels. Dependent on consistency. Dependent on continuation. Dependent on things not going wrong. You are not afraid of today. You are afraid of interruption. The fear feels rational, not emotional. It feels like awareness. Awareness that the system is fragile. Awareness that recovery is slower now. Awareness that starting over would cost more. The fear stays quiet because it has no outlet. You cannot complain. Nothing is obviously wrong. Early money fear is about scarcity. Later money fear is about exposure. In your 20s, fear comes from lack. In your 30s, fear comes from comparison. After 40, fear comes from fragility. You have built something worth protecting. That makes you vulnerable. Stability creates dependence. Dependence creates sensitivity to disruption. The system you built works, but it requires constant maintenance. Maintenance becomes the source of tension. You are no longer trying to get ahead. You are trying to keep things standing. That shift changes how money feels. Money stops representing progress. It begins representing defense. Defense against time. Defense against uncertainty. Defense against decline. You did not fail. You reached a stage the script never explained. The fear shows up in small behaviors. You check balances more often. Not because you expect bad news, because reassurance fades quickly. You think twice before spending. Not because you cannot afford it, because everything feels connected now. One expense leads to another. One decision affects future flexibility. You notice how much life costs to maintain. Not luxuries, basics, housing, insurance, health, time away from work. Everything feels heavier. You begin measuring money differently, not by growth, by endurance. How long can this hold? How long can you sustain this pace? The fear stays quiet because it feels reasonable. You become more aware of your body. Energy is no longer unlimited. Recovery takes longer. Fatigue appears earlier. Time off feels shorter than before. You begin factoring energy into decisions. Not just money, not just opportunity. Energy becomes currency. Time becomes cost. Money becomes buffer. The fear is not about poverty. It is about running out of margin of time, margin of energy, margin of options. You realize how narrow margins feel now. Even with stability, the fear shows up in planning. You plan further ahead than before, not with excitement, with caution. You think about worst cases quietly, not obsessively, practically. You imagine scenarios you never considered before. Illness, career disruption, family needs changing suddenly. You notice how many variables exist, how little control you have over some of them. The fear feels like responsibility matured, responsibility without illusion. You cannot talk about it easily. It sounds ungrateful when spoken aloud, so it stays internal. Comparison changes shape after 40. You no longer compare status. You compare resilience. Who seems calm? Who seems flexible? Who seems less constrained? You notice who can change direction easily, who takes time off without anxiety, who speaks about money without tension. You wonder how they built that margin. You wonder if you missed something. Not money, time. You replay decisions quietly. The reasonable ones, the safe ones, the ones that made sense then. The fear grows from realizing time locked them in. The fear does not demand immediate action. It waits. It appears during quiet moments, late evenings, long commutes, empty rooms. It does not push you forward. It pulls attention inward. You feel more cautious, more protective, less willing to risk stability. Stability becomes something to guard. Guarding requires vigilance. Vigilance creates fatigue. Fatigue reinforces fear. The cycle stays quiet, almost invisible. Money conversations change tone. They become practical, defensive, focused on protection, not dreams, not ambition. You stop imagining radical change, not because you lost imagination, because imagination now carries cost. The fear whispers instead of shouting. It asks questions you cannot easily answer. What if this breaks? What if this lasts longer than expected? What if you cannot recover the same way? The fear feels mature. That makes it harder to dismiss. The money fear after 40 is silent for a reason. It comes from having something to lose. It comes from time becoming visible. It comes from stability revealing its limits. You did not fail to feel safe. You followed a script that never explained this stage.